Good evening. Have you got the yesterday's PDF? No? Received or not? Okay. So in that PDF, question and answer both are there. But I hope you will not see the answer and go for the question first. For online students, those who are not able to watch yesterday's lecture in the live mode, we will upload the lecture today in our YouTube channel. So you can get the last lecture plus PDF also. Yes, watch in the class. Fine, because videos are like people are having a lot of videos, but they do not watch it. Fine, collecting here and there from Telegram, right? And after that, they'll not study. Anyways, those who have constraints, they can watch in the online. Now, yesterday we was discussing first chapter of economic survey, and that is state of economy divided into three parts: global, union, and state level. And economic survey itself mentioned that they have not dealt with state in the detailed manner. Though there is a general practice to deal the state's finance in the detailed manner, but because the last survey was released 6 months back, so that is why they have not dealt. Second reason was RBI published one report every year, that is state economy condition. What is the condition of state's economy at present? They will publish a report every year. Okay. And in that report, 2-3 things they have highlighted that is also mentioned in the survey. In fact, what is mentioned in the survey, that is a summary of RBI's report. Okay, if you'll read the survey and you'll read the RBI's report, you will find that they have just summarized what is mentioned in the RBI's financial stability report. So that report is published by RBI every year, that is called as financial stability report. So in that financial stability report, what RBI do? RBI do an assessment. Okay, RBI do an assessment what is the financial stability indicators working in Indian economy. So if you'll see the financial economic indicator, means economic indicator which go for financial stability, one of the important indicator is how much you are borrowing. How much you are borrowing. Because as much you are going to borrow, there will be more stress on you to repay the loan. Fine. And in the financial stability report, they have mentioned still many of the states are going for what? Of the budget borrowings. Fine. They are still going for what? Of the budget borrowing, which is not a right thing to do, number one. Number two, they have highlighted, which I have told you yesterday also, there are the states, what they are doing. They are doing well, means they are able to generate revenue on their own. But problem is, what they are doing, they are putting more money into what? Revenue expenditure, and less money into what? Capital expenditure. More money, and especially this revenue expenditure, more money is going into what? Freebies, which is a very wrong trend. And problem is, it is not decreasing, it is increasing. Today Delhi election happened, fine, and in Delhi election, all of the political parties, they are just announcing what? This will be free, that will be free. This will be free, that will be free. So there is a freebie war. Who is going to offer more? One political leader said that if this party will be elected, then you are going to lose at least 34,000 rupees monthly income. Fine. So in this way, election campaign is happening, and RBI have shown their concern. Fine. So freebies are a big issue in Indian economy right now. Prime Minister, Finance Ministry, RBI, and Finance Commission also. All of these important pillars in the system, they have highlighted this matter. Even this matter is in the court right now, Supreme Court. Fine. Whether political party can go for it or not. So let's see what will happen. So in this way, chapter 1, of economic survey deals on these things. But in chapter 1, they also, when they discussing about union, fine, so they discuss about GDP, fine, GDP. And if you will see GDP in last 3 years, GDP value is increasing or decreasing? Value is increasing, percentage is what? Decreasing. Okay, be careful. Be careful when you are reading a statement. The value of GDP is consistently rising, but the percentage of the GDP is what? Declining. Fine. And government have shown matter of concern on it. Okay. Though in economic survey, they have not mentioned that thing explicitly, but they have mentioned कि yes, we are having this idea कि GDP is shrinking, and they have given the reason for it. And most important reason they have given, headwinds. Especially what headwinds? Global headwinds. So this global headwinds and inflation risk. And for inflation also they have blame on what? Again global headwinds. External reasons are more responsible as per economic survey rather than internal economic reason for decline in what? GDP. Fine. And one interesting thing they did is they measure GDP on the basis of expenditure method. Fine. GDP can be calculated in 3 ways. Fine. There are the 3 methods of calculations of GDP. One is income method. Second, expenditure method. And third is value addition method. So these 3 methods are used for calculation of what? GDP. But in the survey, they have taken what? They have taken expenditure method. Fine. Expenditure method they have taken. And they said that in the expenditure method, C stand for consumption. Fine. I stand for investment. C stand for consumption, I stand for investment, and G stand for government expenditure. Fine. Government expenditure, then plus X minus M. So C is showing private consumption, means how individuals and household businesses they spend. So spending of individuals, spending by businesses, fine. So that is what? Consumption. How household is consuming, how you and I are consuming, how the business houses are consuming the products. Then investments. But again, this investment is what? Government investments or private investments? This is showing private investments. Then G stand for what? Government consumption. How and how much government is consuming. So when we talk about government's consumption, fine. So government consumption means expenditure. Government consumption means what? Government's expenditure. And government expenditure is of 2 types: revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. So capital expenditure is a capital formation or not? So capital formation by the government. Here, capital formation by whom? By government. Fine. And investment here by private individuals. So when they will make an investment, fine, when they invest their money, suppose people have deposited their money in the bank, that money went to the bank. Now bank can do 2 things. He can give consumer loan to purchase certain goods, or bank can give money to industry so that they can expand their production facility. Understood? So here this investment, fine, this investment called private investment first of all, fine, and this capital formation by private sector. Capital formation by private sector. Now, as per survey and as per general economic theories, for any developing country, this plays most important role. This plays very important role. Why? If investments are going to increase, fine, production capacity is going to increase. Employment is also going to income, consumption. Same thing said by whom? Adam Smith, JB say. So this is why these economists are known as what? Classical. Because their theory may be not 100% correct today, but still that theory have lot of relevant. Ki production can drive what? Production can drive economy. So if there will be good private investment in the economy, fine. If there will be good private investment in economy, then there is a good prospect of what? Rise in the GDP. But what we have seen in last 2 to 3 years, especially last 18 months, what we have seen? We have seen that the investment by private sector is consistently on what? Decline. That is a matter of concern. Ki why private investment in emerging economy, or in fact fastest growing economy of the world, still India is what? Still India is fastest growing economy. So why investments are drying up in the fastest growing economy? So that is a matter of concern for the government. So economic surveys like what? I'm scared, but I'm not going to show I'm scared. Right? So in the economic survey, you have to read between the words. So economic survey always very positive. Anyone who is what? Anyone who is feeling what? Like depression kind of the thing, they should read economic survey. Fine, because economic survey is going to give a very good picture. And in order to confirm this, in order to confirm my theory, I have read the economic survey of 1989, when economy was really shrinking. Economy was really shrinking, fine, or almost sunk, not shrinking, almost sunk. But still economic survey is what? Very positive, right? They are giving a good picture. You know, we are battling and we will emerge as a victor. We are doing everything. They are not doing anything. But still they have given what? Very positive picture. Fine. So what we have to do? We have to understand what is written between the lines. And because UPSC is also going to ask questions, but they are not going to be outrightly critical, like it is critical in the when the article is written by certain economist. So UPSC is not going to be that critical, but UPSC is also going to ask certain difficult question to you. What should be done? What should be done to increase India's production and employment mathematics? Fine. So if you are going to write ki this need to be done, that need to be done without mentioning such equations, you can get out of 10, you can get 4, 4.5. But if you are looking to get 5.5 or 6 out of 10, then you have to mention certain equations. You have to mention these things. Key private investments are drying up. As per economic survey, there is a decline in private investment in India in last 1.5 years, and there is a need to revive what? Private investments, in order to boost what? Demand, income, and employment. So such points you have to mention there. Fine. Now, why it is important? If you have seen that PDF, so I have mentioned one term there: gross fixed capital formation. So there is a term known as capital formation. Fine. There is a term known as capital formation. Other term is gross capital formation. One term is what? Capital formation. Other term is gross capital formation. Fine. Capital formation gross capital formation, then gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation. So what is fixed here? Gross capital formation means what? Overall capital formation by private sector as well as what? Government sector. That is gross, gross capital formation. GCF means overall investment or capital formation in India. Then they have used the term gross fixed capital formation. What is fixed here?
Long-term tangible.
Huh?
Long-term tangible.
Long-term tangible. Example?
Like when the property or increasing inventory.
Increasing inventory. Then what is short term? What is fixed here? You are answering or you're just scratching your head? Acha. Huh?
Investment will be for at least 10 years or better.
Investment will be for?
At least 10 years or more.
See, what is the literal meaning of fixed?
It does not change.
Which is not going to change. That is fixed. That is fixed now. So see what happens. For example, Mahakumbh is going on. So in Prayagraj city, certain infrastructure is created. Some of the infrastructure is permanent and some of the infrastructure is what? Temporary. Fine. So the bridge which is specifically made for Mahakumbh, and after that it is going to be dismantled. Fine, it is going to be dismantled. Is it fixed capital formation? No. But if you have created certain structure or infrastructure which is going to be remain there in the use for the longer duration, that is called what? Fixed capital formation. Fine, fixed capital formation. Uttar Pradesh government have spent somewhere around 22,000 crores. 22,000 crores. Fine. And they are estimating the generation of income somewhere around 2 lakh crores. Through what? Mahakumbh. 2 lakh crore rupees worth of income they are expecting to be generated. Fun fact. Because people when go for the bath at that moment, they also do some puja and dravyadan means putting some money. So putting the money means what? They are not going to drop note. What they will drop? Coin. So one person, what he is doing, he is having magnet in his hand and he is trying to search. And do you know how much he is generating in a day? 4,000 rupees. 4,000 rupees worth coin he is what? Collecting. Fine. So sometimes what happens, we are not able to see the invisible hand. We are not able to see the invisible hand, how economy is running. So people see Mahakumbh as a religious event. UP government is not just seeing as a religious event, it is seeing as a what? It is seeing as a economic event. Fine. It is an economic event. So country like India have an immense potential to generate infrastructure, and through infrastructure, especially for which towns? Which are known for their religious pilgrimage. Do you know that what scheme of the government of India is in this context? Huh? Yes. So government have a specific scheme to develop a good infrastructure in those cities of India where there is an immense potential of what? Where there is an immense potential of religious tourism related thing. Fine. So the idea of fixed capital formation is what? The idea of fixed capital formation is the capital formation which is going to be long lasting for the generation of what? Capital and income. That is called what? Fixed capital formation. So gross fixed capital formation means what? Gross fixed capital formation means the capital formation by private sector and government sector overall in order to increase what? In order to increase production, and production through what? Income. Now, let's go back to this equation. GDP, consumption, investment, government expenditure, X minus M means import and exports net. Fine. So in this, if the question is going to be asked, which sector have the largest contribution? GDP question is in front of you. So if the question is going to be asked, what is the percentage contribution by the government? What is a percentage contribution by government? Be specific. Fine. Be specific. What is a percentage contribution by the government in India's overall gross capital formation? Write a question. Write a question. What is the contribution of government of India? What is the contribution of government of India in gross capital formation? Right in the next line. Gross capital formation is equal to investment in fixed assets, investments in fixed assets minus disposal of fixed assets. Now in the next line, write in India's GDP, private final consumption expenditure. Private final consumption expenditure, that is C, accounts 61.8% of GDP. Whereas 61.8% of GDP. So this C stand for how much? 61.8%. Now write about I. Gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation is approximate 34% of GDP. So this I here is 34%. Okay. Now write government final consumption expenditure. Government final consumption expenditure is approximate 10%. Is approximate 10%. So this is 61, this is 34. 61 and 34? How much? 95. And then 10, it is going to be how much? 105. But it should be how much? 100 only. But how it is coming 105? How it is coming 105? Don't eat the pen. Give the answer. Huh? GDP? GDP is increasing every year. In the name of increasing GDP every year, you are going to do the wrong calculations. I have already explained this just few minutes back. Huh? What? No, X minus M is not in the picture right now. Nalayako, Dusto. G stand for what? Government's expenditure. So it is total government expenditure. And government expenditure is what? Revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. What I we have mentioned? Gross fixed capital formation. So this gross fixed capital formation is sum of private as well as what? Government expenditure. So it is looking like 10 here. It is looking like 10 here, but out of this, some of the amount it is going to be added where? Investment. See, what we are showing? We are showing government total expenditure. Okay? What is G here? G shows that government's total expenditure. But total expenditure is comprised of what? Revenue and capital. So that capital expenditure by the government is going to be added where? So that is why here they are showing that how much total government is spending. 10%. But out of this 10%, some of the amount is spent on what? Capital formation. So the amount which is spent by the government as a capital formation, it is mentioned where? In investments. So this is why this calculation is showing in this way. So here C is showing what? Private consumption. Then I is showing what? Total gross capital formation. And G is showing what? Government's final expenditure. So you can keep this thing, the GDP. C, the greater part, then I, then what? G. So you have to keep this thing in your mind, because in the exam they may ask in this way: which of the following is the greatest component of India's GDP? So keep remember that the private consumption is a key to GDP. Why? It is 61%. And in order to have a sustained GDP growth rate over the period of time, these two are most important factor. Why? If the consumption and investments will grow, if both will grow, then government will have higher tax revenue or less tax revenue? Higher tax revenue or lower tax revenue? Higher tax revenue. And this higher tax revenue will allow government for what? Going for higher government expenditure. Fine. So these two are a key factor here. Now, among these two, which one is more important? Huh? Which one is more important? C or I? Which one is more important? C or I? And why? Huh? India has one of the not highest population in the world. Yes or no? So we have good population. Fine. So consumption can be triggered once people have income. We are lacking in what? Income and investments. And that is why we are inviting foreigners to invest at where? India. And that is why finance minister is calling what? Fourth engine as a what? Exports and investments. Fine. So that is a part of what? Growth engine. So why we want to make regulatory reforms? As government has mentioned in what? Budget. Government mentioned that we are open for what? Regulatory reforms. Why regulatory reforms? Because regulators in India still they have an attitude to block the things rather than facilitate the things. Fine. They have this attitude. So you have to change the attitude. You have to work in the way to facilitate rather than what? Block. So that investment can have a more flow in the India. And if there will be more flow in the investments, then it will trigger what? Consumption also. So at this moment for India, investment is very important. Whereas regarding consumption, which one can be called as a biggest factor? Consumption. In the context of India's consumption, which factor can be called as a deciding factor? Factor of inflation plays a very important role. if the inflation is remain high, doesn't matter your investments are rising and moving very fast, but if the level of inflation is going to be remain high in the country, it is not going to produce any real growth. So this is why for the consumption purpose, what is important? Inflation factor is important. And in fact, if the inflation is remain high, then what will RBI do? Increase the interest rate or decrease the interest rate? RBI will, if inflation is high, then RBI will increase the interest rate or decrease the interest rate? RBI will increase the interest rate to bring down what? Inflation. But if RBI will increase the interest rate, then what will happen? The cost of borrowing is going to what? Increase or decrease? Cost of borrowing is going to increase. And investments in India will rise or fall? Fall. So this is why I hold the key. What? Inflation. So inflation hold the key. Why? Because inflation have a capacity to disrupt anything, any factor, anything. Fine. So inflation work as what? Lord Vishnu. Right? Can do anything. Correct to incorrect, incorrect to what? Correct. If inflation is under control, then you have a good sentiment for what? Consumption, and you have also good sentiment for what? Investments. Both are going to be what? Matched, and it can be triggered further. But if that is beyond control, then it is going to disrupt entire thing. So this is identified by economic survey and government. But now government said that the inflation high in India because of what? Geopolitical crisis. Situation is not good in US, situation is not good in the different part, and these are the factors which is creating a problem for what? Inflation in India. Fine. What government is saying that, let them say. But you have to understand in this context. So here, this session is not just for prelims only. This is also for mains. Fine. How inflation play an important role. So in the question related to inflation, if you are going to write this equation, fine. You can write this equation x minus m, and you are going to explain in this context also how this inflation is not going to hit the consumer sentiment, but investments and overall government spending also. That is going to be feather in the cap. Your answer is going to be much better than any other answer. And for the prelims point of view, they will not ask data. Even here also, C, then I, then what? G. They may ask ascending or descending order. In India's GDP contribution, consider the following statement about India's GDP at expenditure method. Which one is a highest contributor? So private consumption, then gross fixed capital formation, then total government expenditure. Understood this thing? So this is the important point of the chapter number 1. Fine. Apart from that, I have already explained you certain things about what? States, particular issues. And I have told you, even today's lecture, I told you beginning, what? Certain states are performing very well. State of Telangana showing that they are financially almost independent. But the problem part is what? State of Telangana is not spending good amount on what? Capital expenditure. Fine, certain states are going for what? Certain states are going for what purpose? More and more revenue expenditure rather than what? Capital expenditure, and they are having what? Off the budget borrowing. Fine. So in this way, the chapter number 1 is closed. Now write the summary of chapter number 1. Summary of chapter number 1, you can write. Give a heading, global economic scenario. Global economic scenario. Global headwinds are impacting, global headwinds are impacting growth prospect. Growth prospect. As per IMF, world economy is going to grow by 3.3%, 3.3% in present financial year, 3.3% in the present financial year and next financial year. Overall, central banks around the world, overall, central banks around the world generally opted accommodative monetary policy stance. Accommodative monetary policy stance. Now give a heading. Indian economy. Indian economy. Right, first point. Indian economy is going to grow by 6.4%. 6.4% in financial year 2025. And this growth is supported by strong growth in agriculture and services sector. Next point. Private consumption is steady at 61.8%. 61.8%, pumped by rebounding rural demand. Pumped by rural demand. See, understand this statement here. So as I said that key consumption play in India's GDP, it is playing how much? 61.8. So when the survey is conducted by RBI, fine, consumer sentiment survey. So RBI also conduct consumer sentiment survey. So consumer sentiment survey, what they try to understand, how the consumer's behavior is there, and they do for the urban as well as rural area. So what is happening in the urban area, the consumer sentiment is declining, but in the rural area the consumer sentiment is what? Rising, and they are putting demand at steady. Actually in the urban area demand is declining. So because demand is declining, so consumption, overall consumption supposed to what? Decline. But because urban demand is what? On rise. Urban demand is on rise, and that is why the overall consumption is not slipping or declining. So who is making an important contribution here? Rural demand. Fine. So it is little bit strange for the Indian economy. Generally, urban sentiment is much higher and stronger than what? Rural. But in last 1.5 years, the rural demand is completely rebounding, and they are trying to match what? Urban. And this is why our overall consumption is not declining, and GDP is not declining as much as predicted by whom? Economists. Because for economists, it is not going to be 6.4%. It is going to be 5.4%. But because of the resilient rural demand, economy is able to perform better. Understood? And see, again I am telling you, in the exam they will ask analytical questions to you, and the words which I am using and dictating, whatever I am dictating you can write. But if you feel that the statement which I have made, resilient rural demand, if you may forget that, write it down. Okay, write it down. Do not wait. I am going to dictate. Whatever important I will dictate. But while discussing, I do analysis, and that analysis I am going to explain here. But if you feel that I am going to forget that, write it down. Write it down. It is going to helpful for you in the exam. Growth projection till year 2025-26 is between 6.3%, is between 6.3% to 6.8%. So current financial year they have said how much? 6.4. And for the next financial year, means the financial year, see sometimes what they will write, FY25. So FY25 means 2024-25 financial year they are talking about. And when they FY26, they are mentioning what? 2025-26 financial year, which is going to start from what date? 1st April 2025. So for that they are saying that it may be how much? 6.3 to what? 6.8%. And for this one 6.4. Fine. So this data, expected GDP growth rate, not in this UPSC exam. There is very less chance that they are going to ask the question on the data. Fine. But see how they can ask the question. They may ask you what is about to be value of fiscal deficit, not in percentage, value. Now question is how I can get the value. It is very difficult. But go to the budget section and see the total expenditure of the government. So suppose total expenditure of the government, suppose it's 40 lakh crores. So how much government is going to spend? 40 lakh crore rupees is going to be spent by whom? Government. Fine. So what is the 1% of this spending? 1% of that spending, 0.4. 40 lakh crore total spending. What is 1%? 0.4 lakh crores. Now government is saying that our fiscal deficit may be 4.4%. Government said that fiscal deficit is around how much? 4.4%. So 4.4 multiplied by what? 0.4. What will be the value? 4.4 multiplied by 0.4. Huh? 17.6 lakh crore is an expected fiscal deficit. CSAT and GS both. Right? So they can ask this question very cleverly. And people will be stunned. How I can calculate the numbers? What nonsense is this? Question is nonsense. You are the nonsense. You see, they have not asked the precise data. So expected value of government expenditure, you have to keep in the mind. You are preparing for the civil services exam. If you are not able to have the expected government's total expenditure in your mind, then it is very difficult for you to clear this exam. Fine. So they have asked this question very cleverly in CAPF exam. UPSC have already asked this question in what? CAPF exam. But it doesn't mean that UPSC cannot ask this question at where? Civil services exam. So be ready for such kind of questions. What they will do? They will give you an approximate data. 4 data they have given. How much? 20 lakh crores, 15 lakh crores, 12 lakh crores, and 17 lakh crore. Which one is an expected government's fiscal deficit? Fine. Now you are stunned. Why? Because in the most of the books and everywhere they are mentioning what? 4.4% of GDP. Fine. Everywhere they are mentioning how what? 4.4% of GDP. They are mentioning in the percentage. But how to calculate that one? So in this way you can calculate. Fine. So some analytical way you have to also apply. So have a rough idea of what is India's GDP value in numbers. So if you have the GDP value in the number, if you have a expenditure relative number in the mind, this is the value of GDP, this is the value of government expenditure, then most of the calculation you can do very easily. Why? Because you know the number, then the percentage you have to find. But if they will ask the percentage, it is very easy for most of them to tick what? 4.4%. But if they will ask number, it is almost difficult for everyone to what? Click on that. Understood? So certain figures, like you should not run behind the percentage point. You should have basic data in your mind. What is India's GDP? How much total expenditure? Approximate revenue expenditure, approximate capital expenditure, approximate tax income, approximate borrowings. These four data. Number one, what? The value of India's GDP. Numerical value of India's GDP. Approximate number. First two digits are sufficient because rest of the thing is going to be lakh crores. So first two digits. Then again what? Government's expenditure. First two digit lakh crores. Government's tax receipts, first two digits. Government borrowing, first two digit lakh crores. So if you have this basic data in your mind, then you can write the figures in the answer also. And the person who is going to evaluate your copy, he is going to stun. How he is having the values in mind. How he is having the values in the mind, which is not possible. Because everyone is writing what? 4.4%. But you have mentioned 4.4%, approximate 17.6 lakh crores, which is a huge amount. And he is also like, oh my God, how he is getting this number? And they do check, they cross-check the number. If you are mentioning certain data, na, what certain students they do? According to Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is also having this, scratching his head when I said this. I didn't say this. So they cross-check it. They cross-check it. Whether this quote or data or fact which is mentioned by you is correct or incorrect. And if it is incorrect, first you will get the benefit of doubt. But if you are using incorrect data consistently, then if he is supposed to give 3, he will give 1. Because you are bluffing. And then he will write this line by line, what mistakes you have committed. So this is why sometimes there are the students who have very good ability to write and they are very bright, but they are getting very less marks, especially in paper 2 and paper 3. Because both paper have certain facts. Fine, articles are there, then case studies are there. Fine, then in the paper 3 there the data is there. So be careful. For economy, these 4 or 5 data keep in the mind always. It will be very helpful for you. Because in the percentage point you are getting always in what? In the newspapers. Understood? So in this way, they have expected about what? Indian economy. Fine. Now the third point, right? One more point in that. One more point in the India's economy. One more point. Food inflation. Food inflation, which is biggest contributor. Food inflation, which is biggest contributor in overall inflation, expected to ease from fourth quarter of financial year 2025. Fine. So they have mentioned this thing, and the data is also showing that the food inflation is what? Food inflation is on decline, and this is why everyone is expecting that RBI is also going to go for what? Rate cut. Fine, because inflation, especially which inflation? Food inflation. So food inflation will come under core inflation or headline inflation? Food inflation will come under core inflation or headline inflation? Answer. Yes. Food inflation. Headline inflation or core inflation? What is core inflation? What is core inflation? What is headline inflation? Huh? Except food and fuel. Fine. Except food and fuel. Other things part of what? Core inflation. And food and fuel comes under what? Headline inflation. Fine. So RBI generally focuses on what? For inflation related management, monetary policy related thing, RBI focuses on what? RBI focuses on core inflation. But if the food inflation is going to be remain very high, then RBI do not have any choice but to increase what? Interest rates. So inflation, it is what? Headline and core inflation. Those people who do not know that, they can write it. Food and fuel is a part of what? Headline. And other things, core inflation. Understood? So headline inflation, or in other words, food inflation, is a biggest concern. And this idea of headline and core inflation was given by a former governor of RBI, D. Subba Rao. Fine. And he wrote a very wonderful book on economics, Indian economy, Who Moves My Interest Rate? Fine. Who moves my interest rate? And if you have written a hobby in your application form, reading books, fine. Don't write watching reels. Okay. They ask in-depth question. Whatever you are writing as a hobby, be prepared. They are going to what? They are going to ask in-depth question. This is, I am repeating again and again. Fine. And they do ask. So if you have not filled your form and still is in process, and you are randomly going to write any hobby, certain people say that, sir, I do not have any hobby. Actually, they are scared of what? Writing any hobby which is going to what? Which is going to be questioned. Sir, I have only one student message. Sir, I have a hobby of sleeping. Fine. So such kind of a thing is going to embarrass you a lot in the interview panel. You will be under a very difficult situation. Fine. So those people who do not have any hobby, try to write yoga. But while writing yoga, do some practice of yoga. Otherwise, you know that what is possible to be happen. I told you already that story. Matsya Asan wala story. Fine. So you can write yoga if you are not at present, you do not have any hobby. Okay? If you do not have any hobby at present, mention the yoga, performing the yoga. Fine. Do not write yoga instructor, performing the yoga. Fine. You can mention that. One person wrote podcast. They asked 15 minutes. Out of the entire interview, 15 minutes they have asked the question on podcast. And do you know what question they have asked? Do you think podcast is a reductionism? He was stunned. Why? First of all, they have asked certain basic questions to him. Okay? Certain basic questions. Then they asked this question, what is your optional subject? He said that's political science and international relations. Fine. And after a few minutes, when they saw that, acha, they are asking question on podcast, different podcasts, acha, this one, that one, this one. Then they ask this question, do you think that podcast is nothing but a reductionism? And he was not having this idea in his mind. So he said, sorry. Later on, during the interview, he was able to recall what is reductionism means. What generally, if you see the podcast, what people are giving. People are saying that this happens, means what they are doing. They are picking a specific example. And with that specific example, they are generalizing the thing. So when you are picking certain particular example, and with that example, you are generalizing the thing. That is a method of what? Reductionism. So podcasts are actually reductionism. Though sometimes they are informative in the nature. But when they start giving opinion or suggestion, so these suggestions are nothing but what? Reductionism. So if you are listening and getting the knowledge, it's fine. But if you are going to apply those methods and methodology or suggestions they are giving, that is just nothing but what? Reductionism. They are talking about body's metabolism. Means those scientists who are doing the research for last 30-40 years, they are an idiot. This man came and he is explaining about gut. Fine. And he, with his example, he is saying that whatever the studies happen, that is nonsense. So that is reductionism. So be careful when you are mentioning it. Acha, one more thing students told me yesterday, that they are having certain issues in their application form. Fine. So I spoke with Umesh sir. Tomorrow he will come, means I will take 1 hour session, and then he will come and he will take one more session, and you can ask your specific question. So he is not going to take a general session. But if you have any question related to your application form, fine, what I have to attach, what I have to do here, there, anywhere, whatever the question you have in your mind, you can ask to sir, he will explain. Fine. So he will explain. So that session will be happen tomorrow. After my class, 1 hour session of mine and then his session. If you have doubt regarding application form, and ask precise question. Sir, how to fill the form? This is not a precise question. Fine. Achha, one more thing. I hope you are aware of that UPSC have given another notification regarding how to correct that OTR. One-time registration. Have you seen that or not? So they have given this opportunity, but one time only. One time only opportunity is there. You can see the UPSC's website. They have notified that those who want to make changes, they have given what changes you can make, and that is one time opportunity only when the application form is going to be closed. So please see that notification also and fill the form carefully. All right. Sir will take session tomorrow in that regard. Okay. Now come back to our point. So food inflation can play a very important role. Fine. And the concept of headline inflation and core inflation was explained by whom? D. Subba Rao Sahab. He was a former governor of RBI and he wrote a one book known as what? Name of book is Who Moves My Interest Rates. Fine. And recently D. Subba Rao has criticized RBI for too much stick on what? That inflation bracket. He said that the RBI need not to too much rigid on the inflation bracket of 4% plus minus 2%. That is good for developed countries. Such kind of inflation targeting is good for what? Developed country. Need of the R is what? RBI have to play proactive role in order to what? Support the economy. Fine. So D. Subba Rao was also in the news. But anyways, you have to keep in the mind the question of what? Headline inflation and core inflation. Fine. Now, right, next point. Most of the states in India are on course of correction. With respect to their taxable income, and overall debt. However, certain states are still going for off the budget borrowing. Capital expenditure is decreasing. Capital expenditure by states is decreasing, and revenue expenditure is increasing. Revenue expenditure is increasing, which is not good thing for state's economy. Fine. Now, chapter number 2. Monetary and financial sector development. Monetary and financial sector development. Fine. And in this chapter again, Mr. Nageshwaran said that everything is fine. No need to worry. Fine. Again in this chapter, the message is what? Everything is fine. We are improving. We will make it better. And things will go very good. So don't worry. This is the crux of this chapter. Fine. In this chapter, they have dealt with few things. Fine. In this chapter, they have dealt with the banking system, financial institutions. Fine. Financial institutions. And when they talk about financial institutions, they have talked about banks, banking, basically commercial banking. So first they have talked about what? Commercial banking. Then they talked about development financial institutions. Fine. Development financial institutions. Then they talked about rural financing. In rural area, what financing system is there and how it is working. Then they also talked about what? Financial market. So the basic theme of this chapter, financial institutions, financial market, and they also talked about what? Third thing, monetary policy. So they deal with monetary policy, they deal with financial institutions, and they deal with what? Financial market. Majority of the focus of this chapter is on monetary policy and financial institutions. And they have just given a kind of summary ki how this financial market is working very well. And in the context of financial market, fine, where investors, fine, what is financial market? Financial market is a place where you can basically invest in what? Equity and debt. You can purchase the shares, you can purchase the debt securities. So in India, debt market is there and equity market is there. Fine. So they have concluded that because of global headwinds, foreign investors, they are keeping money their money out. So there is a huge capital outflow from where? India. But the impact of this capital outflow is not anything on what? India's financial market. Banking system is facing heat. Investments are facing heat. But the financial market is still resilient. Why? Because Indian investors, they have shown their utmost faith in the financial market. So despite heavy withdrawal by the foreign investors who are investing in the India's financial market, still the Indian investors, they have shown their too much confidence in the financial market, and that is why despite all other emerging economies market is shrinking, India's financial market is on what? On rise, and having a compound annual growth rate of approximate 11%, which is very promising. And it was completely unexpected initially that India's financial market is not going to grow. And all those who are investing in India from outside, they are withdrawing their money. But Indian investors are keep putting their money in where? Financial market. Fine. And there are some foreign investors also who have shown their faith in the India's market. For example, Canadian Pension Fund. So Canadian Pension Fund have invested somewhere around 4.8 lakh crores 4.8 lakh crores they have invested in the India's market, and especially in LIC. Despite a bad relations, I can't call it bad relations between India and Canada. Fine. Despite that, they have not withdrawn. Why? Because they can see Indian economy is going to grow properly. Fine. So certain institutional investors, institutions who are investing in India, they have shown their faith. But retail investors, they get panic and they started moving out their money from India's financial market. But despite their withdrawal, Indian financial market is still able to show a very promising growth because of what? Domestic high sentiment. And because of this domestic high sentiment shown in where? Financial market. Who is facing problem? Commercial bank. Why? People are not willing to deposit their money at where? Bank. They are putting their money in where? SIPs, mutual funds, fine, and other market instruments. So this is why banks are also facing a heat. They are not able to compete with what? Financial market. So that is a negative impact of strong financial market supported by what? Domestic investors. So see, domestic investor was having this doubt in the mind. Ki mutual fund is offering me 13%. Mutual fund offering me how much? 13%. Whereas bank FD is offering me 7.1%. Fine. A and B. So A invested at where? Mutual fund. In 2020. Fine. And B was having what? B was having investment in the fixed deposit. So for last 4 years, his growth of income is how much? 13%, 13%, 13%, 13%. Fine. Whereas he is earning how much? 7.1. And that is why he is also forced to rethink, to withdraw the money from where? Bank deposits, and invest that money at where? Either SIPs or mutual funds. And this is why the growth of bank deposits is getting negative, whereas the growth in the financial market is on what? Rise. So this is why government do not have any worry about what? Financial market. In the context of financial market, there is a term known as meltdown. Fine. The term is known as meltdown. So when investors start taking money out from what? Financial market in the gradual manner. Have you seen that? What happened? The day DeepSeek came, NVIDIA, the GPU maker, how much they lost? $600 billion. $600 billion, the loss of the value in a single day by NVIDIA. $600 billion lost. Why? Because basically these AI models known as large language model, and in order to process that data you need what? GPU, not CPU. GPU. Fine. And these GPU are expertly made by whom? NVIDIA. And without having NVIDIA chips, the chip made by NVIDIA, without those chips, Chinese company is able to develop large language model, and that is providing free of cost. So why people will purchase NVIDIA's chip? So why I will have my money in what? NVIDIA's share. So people have withdrawn they have started selling those shares, and that is why value lost how much? $600 billion. Then later on they started investigating because everyone have a suspicion on China. So later on it is found that the NVIDIA's chip is indirectly procured by that company, which have developed this large language model of DeepSeek. Fine. So financial market are generally highly vulnerable. So there is a rise and fall in the financial market in this way on day-to-day trading basis. This is not called meltdown. What meltdown means? In the long run, when your financial market is what? Shrinking. Means in next 2 to 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, what is happening? consistently, this is your financial market. Okay. And I have put these boundaries in terms of investments. So that is shrinking. So this shrinking is called what? Meltdown. And the term came from what? When you put ice in the room temperature. Fine. When you are going to put the ice in the room temperature, it is going to what? Melt down. But not all of a sudden, but gradually. So when there is a gradual fall in the market, then it is called what? Then it is called melt down. You can write it down. When there is a sustained fall in the financial market, sustained fall in the financial market, it is defined as meltdown. It is defined as meltdown. Right further in that, due to global headwinds, foreign investors started withdrawing their money from India's market. And meltdown was expected. However, due to strong domestic participation in financial market, India's financial market is on rise. Okay, so this is about financial market. Okay, this is about financial market. Now we will move towards two things. One is monetary policy and second is what? Banking. And what we are going to discuss today's session and tomorrow's session, you can expect at least two questions in the exam, directly or indirectly. What we are going to discuss in these two sessions. Fine. So first thing I want to discuss here is regarding banking. So when it is about banks, so banks accept the deposit for the purpose of lending. So when you are lending the money, you are at risk or not? You are at risk. Why? Because maybe the borrower will default. And if the borrower will default, then bank will default. And if bank will default, customers who have deposited their money, they will lose the money. Yes. And it is not just a loss. They will never going to invest again. So bank's game is over. So it is very important to prevent bank to go in such kind of a crisis. Fine. To prevent the bank to go in such kind of a crisis. So first thing, prevention. So how to prevent? So to make sure that the bank must have a fixed amount of money with themselves, so that if any crisis will come, they can what? Manage it. Otherwise, there is a situation known as bank run. When banks start running, it is called what? Bank run. When banks start running, it is called what? Bank run. Branch from Ashok Nagar moved to what? Chikadpalli. Bank is on run. That is bank run. What is bank run? Depositors are going to withdraw their money and bank is out of cash because of excess withdrawal. Because of the excessive withdrawal of the money, by the depositors, then the situation is known as what? Bank run. And normal investors are not able to understand. They are not able to understand at all कि what is the situation, liquidity situation. They are going to say कि भाग में गई liquidity situation. I need my money. That's it. I need my money right now. Whether you are going to print or whatever you are going to do, I need my money. That's it. They will not understand liquidity situation and inflation pressure and liquidity is moving from here and there. They will not understand. They will say that I need my money. And this is why I told you in the classes also that CRR is required, cash reserve ratio, so that in the situation of bank run, that money can be used to avoid the situation of what? Bank run. Fine. But apart from that, there are other measures also to prevent bank from what? To prevent bank from situation of bank run. And in fact, what happened? If you will go back to the 2007 financial crisis. So how this 2007 financial crisis came? The term is known as subprime lender. So what is subprime lender? What is prime lender? Prime lender is a lender, or in the case, you can understand in this way, prime borrower. So the prime borrower, the borrower who borrowed the money, but returned the money on time with interest. Whereas there are certain borrowers who are at higher risk. For example, you are giving home loan and you are giving personal loan. So home loan always based on collateral. Bank is going to hold the paper of your property. Till then you are not going to repay. But personal loan, no collateral. And person finally said that I do not have any money. Whatever you want to do, do it. Whatever you want to do, do it. I am not going to give your money. Then what bank maximum will do? What banks are doing these days? They are keep calling to the customer, repay your money. Otherwise, we will send our people to visit your home, and they will ask in front of everyone. He said that, don't worry. I already have zero value in the society. What you are going to do? You are going to try to what? Humiliate me in front of the people? I already taken money of them. So I don't care. Then what you will do? You will send a notice. I am very happy. Send the notice because I am waiting for that. Because once the notice will come, I and you will meet in where? Court. And I am very happy because then we will play what? Court to court. And courts in India are already overburdened. They are having more important cases to discuss. Murder and dacoity. Rather than discussing what? Loan. Judge is going to say, isko side mein rakho. Put that case first. So bank is going to lose his money. And that is why these days banks are very careful. They are trying to get all the information, everything. But if the customer is going to say, I'll not give your money, whatever you want to do, personal loan case, fine, then bank is going to lose the principal amount as well as what? Interest amount. Fine. So this is why it is important to restrict the bank. But earlier, before 2007, banks were not restricted. So Lehman Brothers Bank have put lot of money to whom? Those subprime lenders. Fine. And these lenders, these borrowers are not able to repay the money. Then banks' assets values what? Decrease, and depositor got panic. And they run towards where? Bank. So one of the oldest bank in US collapsed within a span of 30 days. So in the 30 days, one of the oldest US bank is what? Collapsed. So in order to prevent banks to doing such things, there is a international committee known as Basel Committee, based at Switzerland. So Basel Committee time to time give a guidelines, and under that guidelines, every central bank have to manage certain things. For example, Basel III. Basel III has suggested maintain 8% capital adequacy ratio. I'll explain what is it. 8%. RB said that, no. 9%. So if Basel is saying that 8%, RB is saying that, don't worry, we are already maintaining how much? 9%. So RB is like typical Indian father. Fine, typical Indian father. What you are going to wear, I will decide. You are not going to decide. Fine. So RBI already maintains how much? 9% capital adequacy ratio. So capital adequacy ratio is an important thing for what? Commercial banks. So as per Basel 3, it should be how much? 8%, but RBI is asking to maintain how much? 9%. So what is it? Please write it down. Capital adequacy ratio is also known as capital to risk weighted asset ratio. Capital to risk weighted assets ratio, CRAR. Capital to risk weighted asset ratio. Capital to risk assets weightage ratio. Right? It is a measure used in banking to calculate and estimate banks' financial strength and stability. It ensures that bank have enough capital. Enough capital to absorb potential losses and avoid bank run situation. And continue their operations without risking depositors' money. This is the formula. Tier 1 capital plus Tier 2 capital upon risk weighted assets multiplied by 100. Now write what is Tier 1 capital. Risk weighted assets. Right? What is Tier 1 capital? It is also known as core capital of the bank. It is also known as core capital of the bank, which comprise of equity, reserves and retained income. Whereas Tier 2 capital is known as supplementary capital. Tier 2 capital is known as supplementary capital. Includes subordinated debt, comma, loan loss reserves, and undisclosed reserves of bank. Undisclosed reserves of bank. Fine. So basically, what is tier 1 and tier 2 capital? So tier 1 capital is what? The capital on which bank have utmost confidence कि it is going to be retained. There is less possibility of loss. Acha, first of all, what is capital for the bank? Forget about what? Tier. First understand what is capital for the bank. So the sources of earning of the bank, they are called as what? Capital. Fine, they are capital. Whereas the money which he has accepted from depositors, that is what? Liability. So that is liability and that is what? Asset. Now banks generally classify their assets into 3 tiers. But in India, it is classified into what? 2 tiers. Tier 1 and tier 2. So tier 1, the main sources of the bank's income will be part of what? Tier 1, and supplementary sources are the part of what? Tier 2 capital. So tier 1 capital and tier 2 capital. Now what is risk weighted assets? Fine. So write an example, risk weighted assets. Like write in the numbers. Fine. Write in the numbers, not in the row. Write in this way. Number one, investment in government securities. Investments in government securities. Fine. Next, home loans. Third, corporate loans. Fourth, personal loans. So what you have written first? Government securities. Second is home loan. Third, corporate loans. Fourth, personal loans. Fine. Now here, what is you can write? It means government securities now. Above that, here you can write risk percentage. Like this. You have written government securities now. Government securities. Here you can write in this way percentage risk. Percentage risk is how much percentage of risk? 0. On government securities, risk percentage is what? 0. Fine. Risk percentage is 0. And for just your understanding, put the amount here is 10,000. Put the amount as 10,000. Risk factor is what? 0. Fine. Now, second is home loan. On home loans, generally banks consider risk weightage of how much? 50%. Means if loan is going to be bad, bank may cover how much? Still bank cover 50%. So this is why risk percent is how much? 50%. Fine. Now the value you can mention again how much? You can mention 20,000. Home loan you can mention how much? 20,000. Here you can mention how much? 20,000. Fine. Now third is corporate loans. Here risk is how much? Here risk is 100% because they are unsecured loan. Risk is 100% because they are unsecured loan. Whereas home loan is what? Secured loan. You can mention where you have written the 50% now because it is secured loan. Secured means what? Home loan is always given against collateral. Collateral is what? The property paper. So bank is going to hold the property paper till then, and in fact, even you have repaid the loan. Bank will not return you the property paper until unless you will get NOC, no objection certificate. So NOC is required. Until unless NOC is not given, bank means you want to resell the property. You want to sell the property, but until unless you have an NOC, fine. And in fact, anyone who is supposed to purchase home or their family want to purchase the home, make sure that there is no loan on that. So ask the person, bring what? NOC. What happened in the Bengaluru few days back? A same home is sold to 7 people. Same home. And the value of home is only 2.3 crores. Now imagine that 7 people have paid that money. Welcome to India. Fine. So on home loans, there is a percentage of what? 50%, but corporate loans are unsecured loan. That is how much? 100%. Now what? PL, personal loan. Are you getting the messages of PL or not? Many of you are getting the loan of personal loan. Fine. So on PL, the risk percentage is how much? 150%. Principal as well as interest amount is also going to be what? Go, went, gone. Right? So that is why risk percentage is here how much? 150%. Fine. So in this way, now you can write the corporate loan value 50,000. Corporate loan value you can write how much? 50,000. Fine. Personal loan 10,000. Personal loan is how much? 10,000. Now can you calculate the risk weightage? Can you calculate the risk weightage here? What is the risk weightage of government security? What is the government security value? Government security loan value. Mind, body and soul should be in the classroom. Fine. Otherwise, it will be a big problem for you. Okay. So, government security value is how much? 10,000. Risk weightage is 0. Fine. So, risk weighted asset value will be 0. Why? Because there is no risk on that. So, risk value is what? 0. Now, come to what? Come to home loan. What is the value of home loan? 20. So, what is the risk weighted asset value? Risk weighted asset value 10,000. 20,000 is our loan value, na? And how much risk is there? So here value will be what? 0, and here value will be how much? 10,000. Now what was that? Corporate loan. 100%. What was the value? 50,000. So what will be the value of risk weightage? 50,000. Fine. Now here personal loan 10,000. But value will be how much? 15,000. So what will be the total risk weighted assets? Risk, अरे calculate करके बोलो ना answer. What will the risk weightage value? What is the asset of the bank? अरे calculate करके बोलो ना. How much? 90,000. So 90,000 is your asset value. Okay, 90,000 is your asset value, and risk weighted asset is how much? 75,000. Can you calculate CRAR? So tier 1, tier 2 capital value is 90,000, and risk weighted asset is how much? Don't look at me, calculate and give me the answer. थोड़ा देख रहे हो मेरा? Give the value. 90,000, 75,000 multiplied by 100. How much? Itna time. And you have to go for CSAT also. Huh? 6 lakh? 6 lakh कहां से आ गया? 90K divided by 75K multiplied by 100. First K. Now 90, 75, 1. How much? Dadho, jaldi batao answer. Huh? 120. Fine. 120. So here value of CRAR is how much? 120. How much you need actually? 8% as per what? Basel norms. As per Basel norms, how much you need? 8%. As per RBI, how much you need? 9%. But how much you have? 120. So you can ask RBI to get out. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me because I have this value. But just giving you a glimpse. Just giving you the glimpse. Now imagine that. Imagine that RBI is asking you to maintain how much? 9%. And banks is having how much? Only 7%. Fine. Bank is having how much? 7%. Total value is 100 and bank CRAR is how much? 7%. And bank have to maintain how much? 9%. So bank need to be capitalized or not? Bank need to be what? Capitalized. So the concept is known as capitalization of banks. So if it is a public sector bank, so public sector banks need capitalization in order to maintain RBI's value of what? CRAR. So government said that okay, we will provide the capital. We will provide the capital to whom? Banks. In terms of what? Equity. In terms of equity capital, because equity capital is a part of what? Tier 1 capital. So banks are going to be recapitalized by whom? Government. So in the last decade, government have went for 1.90 lakh crore capitalization of public sector banks. So government went for calibrated money disbursed to whom? Public sector banks on annual basis. 40,000 crore, 30,000 crore, 40,000 crore, 20,000 crore. So every financial year they are providing what? Money to whom? Banks. So that is why the public sector banks are capable of what? Public sector banks are capable of reaching the level is required for what? CRAR. But question is why? Why government? Because government is having a ownership in the public sector banks. But the other part is because public sector banks are an instrument used by government to push their development agenda. Yes or no? Many of the schemes of government of India is provided through whom? Banks. Banks are being forced to go for what? Priority sector lendings. And public sector banks are having higher targets. And many times what government do? Government is going to waive off those loans. Who is going to have a loss? Banks. So banks are going to have what? Banks are going to have a loss. So there is always a strong possibility public sector banks may be in trouble as soon as possible and a severe crisis, because private sector banks are well capitalized, because they do not need to put themselves in certain schemes of government of India like crop loan. So private sector need not to participate in that. It is a responsibility of whom? Government banks, public sector banks. So this is why public sector banks are more vulnerable in context of their profitability, returns of asset. And this is why what happened? This is why government thought that there is a strong need of what? Capitalization of these banks. So maybe today this CRAR is not a big thing in the Indian economy. But in last decade, CRAR was a very big thing. Fine. And the capitalization of public sector banks was a big headache for whom? Government of India. Fine. So this is one term regarding what? This is one term regarding banking system, CRAR. Now write one question on it. After this question, I will wind up. What is the timing for today's class? 6:45, 7:45. अभी सबको सब सुनाई पड़ता है. What was the timing? Write the question. Last question for today's class. Consider the following statement. Consider the following statement. Number 1. CRAR is a measure of bank's financial strength. CRAR is a measure of bank's financial strength and represents the ratio of bank's capital to its risk weightage assets. Under second statement, under Basel III norms. Actually, I have to give this question earlier. I made a mistake. Under Basel III norms, RBI mandates Indian banks to maintain minimum CRAR of 8%. Third statement. A higher CRAR indicates that bank have stronger capital base and better positioned to absorb risk. Answer. First statement is correct or incorrect? Correct, because it's what? Bank's capital divided by what? Risk weightage assets. So first statement is correct. Second statement? Wrong. Why? RBI mandate what? 9%. Basel committee. Acha, if this kind of question will come in the exam, be little bit careful about the wording of the statement. Don't get overexcited. Basel norms said that how much? 8%. So maybe this statement can be written in this way. Same second statement, you can think in this way. According to Basel norms, there is a need of 8% CRAR maintained by the banks. If this is the statement, correct or incorrect? That statement is correct. So sometimes what happened? You saw that something we have already did in the class, or I have revised today in the morning and it came in the exam. So in the case of what? Overexcitement. Fine. The overexcitement is going to kill your prospect. So it's a game of patience also. Fine. So even if you know the things, be careful in the reading. Okay, be careful in the reading. So here we are winding up today's session. Tomorrow we are going to discuss. I have not done yet. So tomorrow few things which we are going to discuss, that is net profit margin and certain technical terms related to the banking first. And then one crucial aspect of the monetary policy, how money is calculated in the Indian economy. In fact, if you will see the economic survey, they have properly mentioned broad money and reserve money. Fine. So broad money, reserve money, money multiplier like thing they have mentioned. So we will discuss in tomorrow's class. Okay. And again, tomorrow sir is also going to take a session. So whatever doubt you have regarding your application form, you can ask him. Okay. Thank you.